across Rahul Roy-Chaudhury on the point that's being made about what happens to Bangladesh from here. This concern that Bangladesh could potentially be the next Afghanistan in a worst case scenario, in a slightly less extreme scenario. It could be a Pakistan. At the very least, it could be the next Sri Lanka. What's your reading of what happens from here?
Rahul, it's too early to say. I respect Hiranmay Karlekar. I know him well, and his book did come out several years ago. So I think we look at it in the current context, and we really have to see what is happening on the ground. And the situation is unclear. We are getting different reports from different people. We've just heard from Sheikh Hasina's son about members of parliament being killed, about attacks on former ministers, etc. So I think the first important thing really is to see how quickly we can get stability within Bangladesh, how quickly the army and interim government led by, I believe, Mohammad Yunus is able to get stability. Once the stability...
Mohammad Yunus is now in his mid-80s. Can he get the job done? 20 years ago, sure. He's having some medical procedure apparently in Paris before he comes back. Does he have the physical and the mental equity now to run and hold Bangladesh together in these extreme circumstances, Rahul?
I think the real power will be the Bangladesh army in support of an interim government. And I think that is where we need to see. So I don't think the example is going to be like Afghanistan, though we'll see what happens. But I think more likely Pakistan, where there will be a hybrid sort of form of democracy, where the Bangladesh military will have tremendous power. That is the sort of model that is likely. But as I said, I think we'll have to see how developments pan out. But for India, just to add quickly, this is as other commentators have said, this is a very difficult challenge for India. But it is essential that India is able to engage with whatever form of political control emerges in Bangladesh. Remember, for India, you have to understand India's limitations of power, of influence it has in Bangladesh. When it gives and it has invested so much in development aid in Bangladesh, it's not giving it to the Sheikh Hasina government, it is giving it to the people of Bangladesh.
But there are many, Sushant, in Bangladesh don't see it like that. Sheikh Hasina was arguably India's only friend. The other political players in the country are quite anti-India in their politics and in their posturing.
Well, I think, the problem here is that for Indian foreign and security policy, it has always been important to engage with all political players. The problem, particularly in Bangladesh, is that politics in Bangladesh became highly polarized. So it was very difficult for the Indian security establishment to maneuver, keep Sheikh Hasina's government on the right side, but at the same time maneuver with other political aspects. And that is a fundamental problem for India, dealing with all South Asian countries, including Bangladesh. And that is that an ideal situation really has to be that any government in India needs to have strong links with the
Sushant Sareen,
government power plus the opposition.
Karlekar in the studio says Bangladesh could be the next Afghanistan. Rahul Roy-Chaudhury says no, it could be the next Pakistan. At this moment, Sri Lanka doesn't seem that bad an option. You have some instability and then some stability comes back. What's your sense?
I think, Rahul, if Bangladesh was to become another Pakistan, that would be ideal, because the Americans will love it like they love Pakistan. They will shower it with a lot of aid. The rest of the West will love it. They love countries like Pakistan. So I think Pakistan model is ideal. It will serve the Bangladeshis well also. I think because, the same kind of communalism you will see out there. India will, of course, engage with whoever is in power for whatever that is worth. But also remember that an 84-year-old man, for him, if he gets power, howsoever limited that might be, it's like an aphrodisiac. So I'm sure he'll enjoy it for whatever it is worth. But it's not looking like good days ahead for Bangladesh, because it seems that you could see prolonged instability happening, and that's a nightmarish situation for India, because you already have a Myanmar which is in a meltdown situation. Now, if you have something similar happening in Bangladesh, then your entire eastern flank goes for a 6, which means that you are now engaged on 3 fronts. There is the Pakistan front, there is the China front, and there is the eastern front with Bangladesh, Myanmar in ferment. So So it's not in an ideal situation for us, but what can we do about it? Ultimately, we just have to deal with...
Michael Kugelman, this is really bad news from India's perspective, because you don't want another Pakistan on your east. Pakistan is bad enough. There's Afghanistan flanking it. Now if there's trouble on the east as well, there are reports that China and Pakistan were in a tango to try and destabilize the Sheikh Hasina regime. Do you think in Washington there's an acceptance of that view or a denial towards that?
Well, I think that what has happened in Bangladesh over the last few weeks was an internal crisis. It was precipitated by a peaceful protest against a particular issue, the job quota issue, and then it grew into something much bigger and more dangerous and violent after the security forces in Bangladesh cracked down on protesters and took on this new life of its own. I have no reason to think that there was any type of external sponsorship, but absolutely, I agree that the current situation in Bangladesh poses significant risks for India. I think, in the immediate term, one of the big concerns if you have this extended unrest in Bangladesh, and I should say that today was less violent than Monday. Obviously, you don't want any violence, but there were fewer incidents of violent attacks today than Monday. But if you have extended unrest, the implications for border security for India are very significant, and I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. Bangladesh is not going to become another Afghanistan. Bangladesh has central functioning institutions. They may be very troubled, they may be corrupt, they may be many things, but they do work. And there is a plan in place. There is a plan to develop an interim government. Hopefully there'll be elections sometime down the road. But I do think that so long as the current tensions and the violence, the mayhem that we'd seen in early days does not continue, then I'd be cautiously optimistic that Bangladesh could be on the path to
the big difference between Afghanistan
transition.
and Bangladesh is that Bangladesh has a strong army. Afghanistan didn't. It had an army propped up by the United States. And as Kugelman says, it also has institutions while of course with their flaws, but far stronger than Afghanistan.
Yes, to that extent, that's why I said that it could become an Afghanistan. It's not destined to become an Afghanistan. Now, two things are important. The Islamist fundamentalists are Taliban by orientation. In fact, the Taliban victory in Afghanistan was celebrated by them with the only way they can, communal riot against the Hindus. Just as in 2001, when the BNP and the Jamaat won the elections, there was a communal riot against the Hindus. So this was another. And if I may point out that one of the terrorist groups, Harkatul Jihad al-Islami Bangladesh, had as its slogan, Amra Shabai Taliban, Bangladesh Hobe Afghanistan. We are all Taliban and Bangladesh will become Afghanistan. So the effort...
How much popular support do you think these guys have?
As I said, not much popular support. If they ever come to power, it will be through violence and militancy.
But you heard what the student protester, who's one of the lead coordinators, said. She says, we don't want this kind of communalism. Our problems were with Sheikh Hasina. Sure. It's not like we're in support of the fundamentalists.
Students don't want it. I have no problem with that. But the students are not a permanent political force. Now, there are 4 occasions in Bangladesh history when students played a decisive role. For example, the language movement of early 1950s, which forced Pakistan to declare in April 1954 that Bangla will be an official language with Urdu. And the famous 4 martyrs of the movement, Rafiq, Barkat, Salam, Jabbar, they are iconized in Bangladesh. Then the second time they played a role was against Ayub Khan's capture of power. Third time was in the liberation struggle for which the Dhaka University became a target during the crackdown on March 25, 1971. Fourth time was the Shahbag movement, when the very same students demanded capital punishment for the war criminals of 1971. But after each successful intervention, the student population returned to their business.
That's a very important point. I started this show with Umama Fatima and I'll end with her. You're listening to what a very respected scholar, Hiranmay Kharlekar, is saying, that students on at least 4 occasions in the past have played a very important role in bringing political change to Bangladesh. They then went back to their studies, their work, their businesses, and fundamentalists always took over, and he fears the same could happen. He in fact fears to the extent that Bangladesh could end up as the next Afghanistan. You've heard Hasina's son, you're hearing what our experts are saying. What are you making of this, ma'am?
Well, I heard such about the joy. I don't know what can I say. Was my blood, the level of mass murder his mother has done. Officially 469 people died in last few weeks, and he forgot to actually mention those. And he remembered to explain that the students actually vandalized some police stations. These are his concerns towards the people of this country. So what can we say about a dictator and his son who has concerns about the police stations and metro stations, but not for the people of this country who have been murdered in this situation, murdered by his mom? So it will take me the whole night to debunk his lies. So it's very tough. It's very tough for me. The people they have died. It's very tough.
You know, I realize
People did not do this mass uprisal to keep any kind of political power in this country. They did this to ouster the Hasina government. They didn't want the Hasina government. We didn't want the Hasina government. We don't know what will happen next, but we know that we don't want the Hasina government. And afterwards, you saw that we are having a discussion with the military and the president that we are going to form an interim government. And students are forming the interim government, not any kind of political parties. And this is showing that the Bangladesh is changing, and the new generation of our country is going to change this country.
Well, we wish you the best.
Yes,
we realize this is a very troubling time for the entire country of Bangladesh. You've heard from London, you've heard from Washington, you've heard from Delhi, you've heard from Virginia, from Sheikh Hasina's son, and you've heard from the student protesters and the Hindu minorities that are currently being targeted. What we'll try and do without taking sides is capture what's happening on the ground, report it objectively, fearlessly, fairly, so that viewers have a full sense of what's happening in our volatile neighborhood. I thank our guests for joining us.